So, we left it with, maybe she'd bring me a whole box of doughnuts every single day. Yes, that'd be brilliant. And then, everything started to go wrong. "Giz a bit," said Gamble, suddenly appearing behind me. I quickly turned round, holding my half doughnut behind my back. "No," said Jane, doing the same. She hadn't quite managed to get it into her mouth. "He's my boyfriend, and he only shares with me." "Shut it, Melonhead," said Gamble. His face and hair were still soaked. Jane turned to me. She was fuming. "Are you going to let him speak to me like that?" Nobody had told me that being a boyfriend meant having to stand up to nutters. I don't want to sound like a wimp. Come on. We are talking about a kid who once bit a duck in the playground. "Come on, why are you being so horrible? I just want a bit of doughnut, innit?" said Gamble, shaking me by the shoulders. Thankfully, Miss Clegg stepped in for a change. "Darren," she called out in her bored voice, "come to draw this flat thing over here, whatever it is." "It's all right. You can save it for me for later," said Gamble, before bouncing off. Wonderful. "Don't be scared of him," said Jane. "If you're not having it, I will." Well, that sealed it. She might have been my girlfriend, but there was no way that Jane was getting the whole thing. In any case, maybe he'd forget. Gamble has a terrible memory. On Friday, he forgot to put on his trousers after PE and accidentally went out to play in his undies. Actually, knowing Gamble, this might not have been an accident. I peered over the barrier into the Stingray tank. Then I took the rest of the doughnut in my cupped hand and, pretending to cough, lifted it up to my... Whap! Something cold and wet smashed me in the face. For a moment, I just stood there stunned. Then my cheeks began to sting. I looked down at the floor, and lying by my feet was what looked like a massive blob of blackcurrant jelly. Oh dear, I thought. Jelly, as in jelly fish. Wonderful. I told you earlier that most surprises were bad, and being smashed in the chops with a flying jellyfish is probably about the worst I've ever had. The throbbing pain in my face rapidly got worse. "What the piggywig happened here?" said Mrs. MacDonald, ending a phone call and striding towards me. Gamble ran over too. His clipboard was soaking wet like he'd just, I don't know, used it to fling a poisonous sea creature at my head, perhaps. "You'll never believe it, Mrs. MacDonald," he said, "but Roman was eating a jam doughnut and the jellyfish saw him and it just leapt out of the tank and smacked him right in the face." Mrs. MacDonald squinted at him. "Pardon?" "I think Darren threw it at me," I said, but my lips were turning numb and I couldn't speak properly. "As if I would," said Gamble, narrowing his eyes at me. "If you'd tried to eat the doughnut, this wouldn't have happened." "Miss Clegg," said Mrs. MacDonald, "did Darren do this?" "Didn't see anything," said Miss Clegg, looking up from her mobile. "Excellent." "Innocent till proven guilty," said Gamble. "That's what my uncle always says." "So," said Mrs. MacDonald, "I'm supposed to believe that this jellyfish just hurled itself out of the water and attacked Roman?" "Yes, it's true," said Rosie Taylor, looking smug as she picked up my now soggy half doughnut from the floor. "Look what I found. Hashtag caught red-handed." Mrs. MacDonald raised an eyebrow at me. "So, it was all your fault then, Roman?" "No, I moaned. Ask Jane. My girlfriend would explain everything. She'd tell Mrs. MacDonald that Gamble threw the jellyfish. Maybe she'd even pretend I had nothing to do with the doughnut. Mrs. MacDonald turned to her. Jane, don't tell me you were involved in this too. I am surprised. Jane's cheeks looked ready to burst, and her mouth was clamped shut. She chewed rapidly, shaking her head, then swallowed hard before saying, No, I wasn't, Mrs. MacDonald. I tried to make him stop eating, but it was too late. She burst into tears. Thanks, girlfriend. By now my face felt like it was slowly inflated with burning hot air. Gamble carried the jellyfish on his clipboard back to its tank and tipped it in. I warned you about eating, sighed Mrs. MacDonald before clapping her hands together. Right, medical emergency. Rosie, run to reception and get them to call an ambulance. Roman, don't move. Rosie smiled cruelly. Should I call the funeral parlour as well, miss? You know, just in case. I started to feel sick. Just hurry along, said Mrs. MacDonald, as Rosie ran off laughing. The rest of you, line up. The class reacted like they'd just been told the world was about to end. But what about the shark tunnel? Said someone. Roman headbutts a fish and we all miss out. Thanks a lot, dingy lips. Barry, I said, struggling to speak, but I'm in a out of pain here. Nobody seemed bothered that I'd just been attacked by a deadly sea creature. What if my skin melted? What if my face dropped off? Did anybody actually care? Well, yes, someone did care. Sadly, that someone was Darren Gamble. Mrs. MacDonald, said Gamble, tugging on a sleeve. What now? Said Mrs. MacDonald. We, miss. We? I didn't like the sound of this. Gamble flashed a big grin at her. We cures jellyfish stings. We should all we on him. Come on, everyone, we on Roman. A few people actually nodded, as though this was a good idea. I've heard that, said Miss Clegg. Darren, barked Mrs. MacDonald, pull up your flies. If anyone's going to wee on this boy, it's going to be a trained doctor. I didn't really see how this was going to be much better. Suddenly, Gamble's face lit up, and he ducked out of the room. Come back. Whatever, said Miss Clegg half-heartedly. After a few moments, Gamble returned with something in his hands. This really wasn't good. I shook my head violently and tried to beg him not to do it, but all that came out was... Now, Darren, said Mrs. MacDonald, put that down. Gamble was holding a potty full of yellow liquid. Hey, give that back, cried the mum from the corridor, storming into the room. Behind her, I could hear the little girl crying. Predictably, Gamble didn't listen. It's for your own good, he said, hurling the contents of the potty right at me. Fortunately, I ducked out of the way just in time. Unfortunately, Jane was still standing right behind me. All in all, you could say that Jane took the faceful of warm toddler wee quite well. You could say that. But only if by quite well you mean that she started screaming and completely freaking out. Kevin Harrison was so disturbed that he threw up in the Stingray pool. Ugh, yuck, that's disgusting, and it's all Roman's fault, said Rosie Taylor, who'd just returned to the room. The manager's son is on his... The manager is on his way, Mrs. MacDonald. Maybe we can ask him to call the police so Roman gets put in jail. Cool, it's like an oil slick, said Gamble, except it's an oil sick. Get it? To emphasise this joke, he punched me hard in the arm. Ow! It's not funny, I said. Hope no one expects me to clear that up, yawned Miss Clegg. While this was happening, Mrs. MacDonald was being yelled at by the mum of the toddler. And the little girl, who'd now got a potty back, was dancing round the room with it on her head. It was chaos. In the end, the manager came over and our class was asked to leave. Miss Clegg took everyone to the bus while I went to the first aid room to wait for an ambulance with Mrs. MacDonald. When the paramedic turned up, she scraped and wiped my swollen face to get rid of the poison. Then she spread some cream across the worst bits and gave me an ice pack. Bit puffy but no real damage, she said. You'll be fine with some painkillers. Get your mum to take you to A&E if the swelling doesn't go down. Phew, I was frightened his head was going to burst, said Mrs. MacDonald. Imagine the forms I'd have to fill in. Thanks a bunch. Nice to know you care. You're a lucky lad, said the paramedic. Lucky? I'd just been hit with a flying jellyfish when all I wanted was a jam doughnut. I hadn't exactly got 5 numbers in the bonus ball. I wouldn't eat anything for the rest of the day, though, said the paramedic, zipping up a bag, just in case you feel ill. My stomach did a backflip. No food until tomorrow. I was already absolutely starving, and worst of all, no food would mean no jam doughnuts. I didn't usually go that long without one. What would happen to me? Could get sick. Or come out in a rash. My head could fall off. This wasn't good. By the time Mum arrived to take me home, the rest of the class had been sitting on the bus for almost an hour, and they weren't too happy. When I got on with Mrs. MacDonald to collect my lunchbox and coat, Gamble and a few others stood up and booed like the whole thing was my fault. Miss Clegg even joined in, which I thought was pretty low. I tried to speak to Jam, but she just turned away and looked out of the window. My face was still burning. I dragged my feet off the bus and Mum drove me home. Next chapter. The deadly doughnut triggers an unwelcome visit and I have to watch something disgusting.